You can see from these readings and words for reflection and music, hope is complicated. It's full of worry and joy, uncertainty and confidence, all at the same time. American poet Elizabeth Barrett wrote a poem called Origami Emotion. Hope is folding paper cranes even when your hands get cramped and your eyes tired, working past blisters and paper cuts, simply because something in you insists on opening its wings. Last Sunday, I talked about James Luther Adams' 5 smooth stones of religious liberalism as additional tools for us to grow our faith and grow our souls. And the 5th stone says that liberalism holds that the resources, divine and human, that are available for the achievement of meaningful change justify an attitude of ultimate optimism. But I suggest we don't get sucked in by Adams' use of the word optimism here, because I don't think he's talking about some pie in the sky, bluebirds and happiness, rose-colored glasses optimism. I think he's really talking about hope. Educator David Henderson, a facilitator in Parker Palmer's Courage and Renewal work, wrote that optimism claims everything will be all right despite reality. Hope accepts reality, the poverty of spirit that underlies all fear, instigates all tragedies, bureaucracy, and institutional inertia. Hope is reliant on the capacity of the human heart, trusting that our hearts are bigger and stronger, metaphorically speaking, than we might ever know, that they are capable of breaking open and breaking free, as Reverend Dennison mentioned. Strong enough to face whatever the world throws at us, all that we confront and find that is not life-giving or love-enhancing. Optimism can easily be destroyed by the realities that we face, and then we just give up. And it happens over and over again, both in our personal lives and in history. Henderson continues in his contrast of optimism versus hope. Optimism depends on the world's dark realities relenting. They will not. Optimism requires externals to work themselves out. They will not. Hope, on the other hand, doesn't ignore external realities. It simply knows the human heart's capacity to withstand those realities, and it trusts in the inexhaustible power of our hearts to choose love over fear. Just look around. Look around at all that is happening, good and bad. For one example, the resurgence of Black Lives Matter. Though the reasons for its emerging so strong now are tragic and horrifying, we see people remain committed and present and invite us to join again. Hope is key to this, anchored as it is in hearts and minds that know their worth and dignity and truth. Hope is bigger than those awful realities. Even as so much persistence and patience and courage are required to bring it forth. Hope means we are able to awaken ourselves to the pain of others, to let our hearts be broken open and face the fear even as we know and feel our own pain. And in the depth of that pain, we will act anyway. Hope is acting anyway, believing that it can be otherwise despite evidence that might have us believe it is not. Václav Havel, playwright, essayist, statesman, and human rights activist, wrote this about hope. Hope is Hope is a state of mind, not a state of the world. Either we have hope within us or we don't. Hope is not a prognostication. It's an orientation of the spirit. You can't delegate that to anyone else. Hope is definitely not the same as optimism. It's not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. It is hope above all that gives us the strength to live and to continually try new things, even as conditions that seem as hopeless as ours do here and now. In the face of this absurdity, life is too precious a thing to permit its devaluation by living pointlessly, emptily, without meaning, without love, and finally, without hope. This hope is a very different experience for each of us, because each of us is working past those blisters and paper cuts to a place of centeredness in our own lives. And our lives may be filled with loss or difficulty, yet we're working past it to persevere in folding those metaphorical cranes, thousands of them every day, to give something deep within wings, maybe something like hope. This made me think of the Dickinson poem that people often quote, Emily Dickinson, "Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul." There it is. This is not some great triumphant feeling, something heralded by fanfares and cheering crowds. Under the weight of profound suffering, hope can sometimes look just like getting out of bed and getting dressed and simply showing up. The reality is that one person's ordinary routine can be another person's triumph. We all carry the knowledge of grief, of hunger, loss, hardship, and struggle within us. We carry awareness of people, known and unknown to us, who live unloved and uncared for. And we carry our own unmet expectations and needs as well. We know of people, perhaps not directly in our lives, but we know of people who live in a world of harsh inequality, where violence is a part of the daily mix, where fear abides alongside courage and compassion. Yet we know there is hope. We face discouragement and disappointment on a daily basis. All of us, each and every one of us, has been touched by sorrow, burdened with grief, or paralyzed by fear, challenged by adversities big and small. Yet we don't give up. We may shrug our shoulders sometimes or withdraw, but ultimately we don't give up. We hold on sometimes by a slender thread. Sometimes it may be just a strand of positive thinking, but we hold on. Because hope does not allow despair to get the upper hand. It doesn't ignore those negative things. But if we can have hope, if we can muster hope, if we can hold on to hope, those won't get the upper hand. They won't get the best of us. Hope gives us the power to embrace such awareness. It allows us to be awake to both the beauty and the tragedy of this world. Hopeful people can see a complexity in the situation, can acknowledge the difficulty, the sorrow, the improper and the immoral, and the awfulness of life. People of hope see this and choose to go on, to act anyway, to love anyway, to be vulnerable anyway. They see a ray of optimism, possibility, and that keeps us going on. Yet hope isn't magic, and optimism isn't oblivion. Both are founded in reality, and they sort of work together. because hope requires a plan, and optimism helps us make those plans. Hope is part of our makeup. It is what gets us through the tough times, as we know, and the agonizing difficulties and most fearsome events, the most haunting and frightening nightmares. It can be the thing that propels you out of bed in the morning or keeps you showing up over and over again to do the work that needs to be done. Even when there are cries from the sidelines or whispers and shouts deep inside of you, telling you that this is never going to work, that it isn't worth your while. Yet hope is insistent and at the same time evasive, persistent and elusive. So we often ask, what gives you hope? And I wonder if that is the right question to be asking, because I don't think hope is something that we can count on being doled out, to be given to us like some special treat, like when we're feeling particularly vulnerable or challenged or fearful. We can't just look up to the hills and have hope come down to us on some rays from some godly sunshine. No, to be people of hope, or to be hopeful people, we have to work at it. Like everything else that is of great value in our lives, we have to work at it. Reverend Rob Hardy's wrote this about hope in 2016, after the 2016 election. And he posited that there are 3 things we can do to develop and strengthen ourselves as people of hope. The first thing is to start where you are and take one step at a time. Begin the journey with that first step, even if it's a tiny baby step. Do the good you can, realizing that, of course, there is always more to do. But don't let that stop you. Take the first step. 2 is cultivate a spiritual practice. Being centered and mindful of some larger whole and connected to a limitless spirit of life and love are essentials to being a person of hope. Whether you do meditation or mindfulness practices, or you've developed a rich prayer life, or you have found ways of connecting your spirit to the larger good through pursuits like gardening or hiking or baking, cultivating these kinds of practices that connect us to a life outside of our busy brains and worried hearts is essential. And 3, whatever you do, don't make the journey alone. It seems I'm saying this every week, and maybe it's because this pandemic has brought it all into hyper focus for me, because we're physically disconnected, but we need one another and this community. However we shape it these days, we need it more than ever. So we must always remember that we are not alone. According to the Islamic Sufi mystic Rumi, this quote's attributed to him, there is a secret medicine given only to those who hurt so hard they cannot hope. It is this: look as long as you can at the friend that you love. We need companions for the journey of hope. Family, friends, comrades, lovers. There are times when it is necessary for us to retreat and to do our own spiritual work. And these last 4 months have forced most of us into some kind of involuntary retreat as well. But the journey toward becoming a people of hope cannot be made alone. David Eden, the first African-American senior minister in the Unitarian Universalist Association, who served All Souls in Washington, D.C. in 1969 to 1992, David Eden said, "The church is that institution whose primary purpose is to help people discover, create, and maintain hope in their lives. When people have no hope," he said, "they discover it together. When they cannot discover hope, they create hope together." And this morning's prayer and reading came from contemporary Unitarian Universalist ministers whose work embodies that hope. They are both of what is to me this newer generation of clergy ordained within the past 20 years. Their work is centered on justice making and expanding love and inclusion beyond one small community, calling all of us onward into a renewed world of justice, compassion, and courage. And I close with two more voices from contemporary life where hope sometimes seems in short supply, yet their words tell us it's still there. Chelsea Quakey is the co-author of Taking Up Space, the Black Girls' Manifesto for Change, wrote, "Dare yourself to imagine a different way of life. Hope is essential to action and can be a driving force for change. Sometimes hoping can be overwhelming because for a minute or two you dare yourself to imagine a different way of life and what the future could look like. Above all, hope to me is countless peoples and voices, often on the periphery of society, who are leading with their selflessness, knowledge, and compassion." And so we hear these same themes over and over again resurfacing and now refreshed in a new generation in the face of terror and violence, of erasure and pain. There is imagination and courage and hope. And lastly, these words from Shoshana Zuboff, who has written, "The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, the Fight for Human Future at the New Frontier of Power," which sounds very heavy. But she writes this: "Too many of us fall into numb passivity. My hope is the resurrection of hope itself. After all, what is hope but the deepest conviction that the future can be better than the present? As technological power grows and democracy stumbles, too many of us fall into numb passivity. We trade hope for resignation and succumb to the propaganda of inevitability. But the present is never a good predictor of what may come. Hope thrives in the knowledge that we make the future. Each life is a testament to this wild miracle. We begin, we falter, we begin again."